Hey, church family, it's Thursday, so that means it's Ask the Pastor. And this week we're lucky we have all four of our pastors here to cover some of the questions from services this Sunday. It was Easter and we celebrated together and it was beautiful. We can't wait to be back together in person,
Yeah.
hopefully sooner than later. But in the meantime, this is one way we can connect through the week and cover maybe what's on our minds after hearing the sermon on Sunday. So Ryan, would you kind of do a little recap of the sermon from this past Sunday?
You bet. And thank you, Kara, for hosting this week.
Mhm.
This last Sunday, Easter Sunday, we were in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. And each of these verses had the word endure or endurance in it. And so the title of the message is Easter, the Ultimate Example of Endurance. And within the message, we looked at three strategies for enduring in the faith. The first is to consider your legacy. Which is mentioned there in Hebrews 12, verse 1, the great cloud of witnesses. Secondly, we looked at removing what hinders, those encumbrances that may hold us back from running the race of faith. And the third and most important one is to focus on Jesus, to look to him, the author and finisher of our faith. And so a very familiar passage of Scripture, but also one that pointed us to Christ on Easter Sunday, but also encourages us in this time of uncertainty, this pandemic, to not give up, to not grow weary, to endure this race of life and the race of faith.
Amen.
Yeah. It was great. Thank you for bringing that to us on Sunday, Ryan. We did get some questions.
Okay, great.
So I'm going to go through those quickly so everybody will have a chance to respond. First one. I feel like I've laid down my particular sin over and over, but it keeps creeping back in. How do I truly lay it down?
So I think I'll jump in on that. I think one of the things to recognize about who we are as human beings and sin is that we are ultimately heart-driven, affection-driven beings. And so one of the things that we need to understand is that sin is ultimately an affections issue, and we need our hearts to be captivated by Christ. And if that doesn't happen, then we're gonna continue to struggle. And so I'd say for someone who is struggling, who feels like they're laying it down, know that number one, I think every believer at some point in their life will struggle with this or feel like they're in that place as well. But it's our responsibility to align ourselves with Christ. Pray that the Spirit gives us a passion for Him and His Word. I think another great thing to do in the midst of that is to get accountability around you. Be honest with people. We're told that we can't do this thing called the Christian life alone. We need support and help. And so having people around you that you can be honest and vulnerable with, that are going to hold you accountable, to help you move forward and to help you in your effort to align your heart with Christ is going to be huge. And that actually leads me to something that we're doing, right? We in fellowship, we have our care ministry, our care groups, and we have people who are willing to walk with you in lots of different areas. If you're whatever you're struggling with, whether it be issues of what you watch or choose to look at online, or life issues like divorce and things like that, we've got people who can help you through those things. And but really, it comes down to, with the sin issue, being captivated by Christ, and then we can see victory and Him helping us overcome.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, the next question kind of flows out of that one. I think it's related more to that first question that Pastor Ryan posed during the sermon about thinking about those that have left a legacy for you. This question says, there is no way I can live up to the legacy my mom left me. She was a saint. It's overwhelming for me to live up to the legacy that she left.
I think that's an interesting question, especially since I'm going to answer that one, because the person that I'd look to in that would be my grandfather. He actually turned 90 years old this week. And so we celebrated that through a Zoom call that we were able to have with him.
That's
and
awesome.
so thankful for that. But he has dementia now, and just thinking of the legacy that he has. But the thing that he constantly reminds us of, before he had dementia, was that he was not perfect. He was an imperfect human, right? Seeking to glorify God. And I think the author of Hebrews wants us to be reminded of that as well, right? Each one of those people that we studied in the Hall of Faith had shortcomings, had sin that they battled against. And so, as Pastor Ryan covered on Sunday, our eyes are to be fixed not on them,
right,
but on Jesus, who is the author and perfecter of faith.
Amen.
And so making sure that our eyes are placed on them, we have that cloud of witnesses to encourage us, but yet they're not where our eyes should be fixed.
Very true, which was the third point too. Okay, the next question I think is pointing to removing what hinders us from the sermon. It says, when I think of what hinders me, it's a person who holds me back. How do I know that I need to remove that relationship? Aren't I supposed to love everyone and show them Christ's love?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. It does relate to the verse that speaks of hindrances, and sometimes a relationship can very much be that hindrance. And in fact, even as I think about friendships as a whole, they have a tremendous influence upon us in life. And I would answer the question by saying this: think of a relationship that you have and place it in one of three concentric circles. The broadest circle would be the care circle, because as the question asks, should we still love and care for everyone? Absolutely. I mean, that's part of the Christian ethic, is to continually love, even to love our enemies, right? So I mean, we want to always care and love someone, put them in that broader circle. But then as that circle narrows, that would be the circle of influence, and ask, is this someone that needs to be influencing me? The way they think, the decisions that they are making, because if they shouldn't be influencing me if they're not influencing me to look to Christ, then they need to be in the care circle, but they don't need to be in the influence circle. And then I would say that there's even a much closer circle that might even only have a handful of people in it, which is that most intimate circle, where more time is spent with them, even greater influence and impact from them. And so this can be very tricky, but it's necessary to be able to understand at what level do I want to allow someone to influence me, because if their influence is a hindrance and pulling me away from the faith and from following Christ, I need to be able to address it honestly. And so those three circles may help as we evaluate the relationships in our lives.
I like the visual there, almost like a way of looking at how to build those boundaries, the healthy boundaries in relationships.
Yeah, that'd be a good
great
way of saying it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and another question I think is, comes up for maybe some people around Easter, because we're actually remembering the physical pain that Christ endured for us. The question is, I don't feel worthy of the sacrifice Jesus made for me. It pains me to think of how he died and agonized over my sin. The guilt is overwhelming. How do I live free in the truth of the crucifixion and the resurrection?
Well, that's a very good question. You're not alone. None of us are worthy. None of us have deserved the horrible death that Jesus died on the cross. But Jesus did, in fact, die on the cross to pay the penalty for all of our collective sins. The debt is paid in full. That's the good news. We should not feel guilty. I'm reminded of John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life.
Perfect. What a beautiful way to end these questions, is that presentation of the gospel. Pastors, I'm so thankful for you and how you're leading our church family right now through these uncertain times, and for spending some time today to reflect on the sermon from Sunday. And we hope it encourages our church family, and we'll see you guys again next week. Keep sending in those questions.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you, Kara, for hosting. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.